The first settlers to the area of Howe arrived around the time of the Texas Revolution. In 1843, it is said, the last Indian battle in Grayson County was fought in the area known as Old Howe Road. The settlers to the area were looking for a better life, and the area's rich, fertile land attracted pioneers, farmers, and merchants alike.
A whole lot of it was religion. From there, they just wanted, majority of them that come into this area were English, Pennsylvanian, or Dutch, German descendants. Families, you know, they didn't go anywhere. They farmed the land. The biggest thing was all this was woods and thickets. So you had to clear the land. To get a clear title, you had to have at least 15 acres cultivation.
First settlers were Jabez and Harriet Hanning and Jabez's brother, John. They received the land through the Peters Colony after their arrival from Pennsylvania before 1850. About 1873, the Houston and Texas Central Railway began laying tracks through the area, and a railroad switch was located in the community. When the area received a post office, two businesses were located at the switch, a general store and a saloon. Several houses were built to the east of the switch. Jabez Hanning persuaded the railroad to establish a depot on his land by donating every second lot in his newly platted town to the railroad. In 1876, the name of the depot, the store, and the post office was changed to Howe after F.M. Howe, who worked for the Houston and Texas Central. By the late 1880s, the town had become a major grain shipping center. In 1890, Howe had a population of 450, a steam grist mill, a Farmers Alliance cooperative, and two churches, as well as a number of hotels, doctors, druggists, and barbers. During the 1930s, the Howe Chronicle was published by former governor James E. Ferguson and his brother A.M. Ferguson. By 1914, the interurban was providing service to Howe. This electric train ran between Denison and Dallas with a stop in Howe. The community's population had grown from 521 in 1904 to 680 in the early 1960s. After that, it rose rapidly through the early 1980s, reaching 2,173 by 1990. Throughout its history, Howe has changed from an agricultural center to the city it is today. Yet one constant has remained: the community's demand for quality education. It is said Howe's first school was organized in the home of a lawyer. Howe's first school building opened in the late 1800s. The community needed a place for people to meet when the circuit preacher came to town. The three-room building was used as a church on weekends and school during the week. As the town grew, citizens recognized the need to build a proper school, and the small building was replaced by a two-story building in 1884, also located east of the railroad tracks on the north side of Hanning Street. In 1897, W.H. Bean and John Marshall donated land for a new structure. The handsome two-story brick school was constructed at a cost of $5,000. It was known as the Marshall Bean College, even though it was not really a college. In the early 1900s, a new school was built to meet the scholastic demands of the community. Citizens were proud of the 14-room school and its $1,600 heating plant, which kept all rooms at an even temperature. Coal was used for fuel, and there was a coal chute on the north side of the building that students liked to slide down. As school buildings became overcrowded or outdated, the community accommodated by opening new schools.
Well, the year I started the school, the old building was it was dangerous, and so they're going to have to build a new school building. And I started in the second grade with the new school building there, and that lasted until we got through high school.
Oh, I tell you, they were all precious because they were little third graders. And most third graders like their teachers, and of course that makes the teacher love the children. And I remember seeing them going home, little old bitsy things, you know.
School became the center of the community and gained a reputation as the town's eyes and ears, as well as a center for sports and recreation.
You couldn't do anything without somebody reporting it. You know, the night watchman, if you came in a minute late, he knew it. He told Daddy. It was a town that everybody knew all your business, even though it wasn't important, but it was.
From what I understand, and this was an interesting part of my job at the high school, a lot of people would come in to verify their birth dates that had gone to school here. Reason being is because the Sherman Courthouse burned in the early 40s. So there were no records of birth certificates, and people would come in for different reasons to verify their birth. I have a lot of people that come in and for when they're searching their genealogy and stuff like that. A lady came in this year, and I had heard the story before, and this kind of confirmed it. She had a picture of the 1926 basketball team, and the picture was taken outside behind what is the old school where the administration offices are right now. And there's this little dog sitting on a chair with the basketball team around them. And the story was a photographer there was to take the picture of the basketball team. And the photographer asked the teammates, what's your mascot? And one of the boys that was on the team, I believe his name was Merkel Dickin, he says, I don't know. The photographer had this little dog. It does not look like it was a bulldog, but he just looked at, Merkel Dickin just looked at that, and he says, I guess we could be called the Bulldogs. So the photographer picked up the dog, and I believe he has a little sweater on there. I do have the picture. She shared with me the picture. Set him in the chair with the basketball team around him, and that's how they became called the Howe Bulldogs.
I went to not the old Bean College, but I went to the second. Well, I remember the grade school, we called it, was downstairs. High school was upstairs. And we had a chapel, auditorium, and that's where we walked across the stage when we graduated in '33. And every Friday morning, we had chapel. And we always sung the Star Spangled Banner. And we had prayer. I played basketball, and I was rough as a cob, if that's not the right word, but I had a temper. They took the cinders from the coal, what they call those things? The furnace. They burnt coal in the furnace, and of course those coals leave cinders, and they would take all of those out and put them out on that basketball court. And if you fell, you just skint your knees up pretty good.
The school would contract, I guess, for Last M programs to come to the school. Oh, they'd have 3 or 4 a year. And everybody turned out to see the program or the movie or what it was they had for that time. But the school had to provide the entertainment for the whole community.
It worked out real good. We had a good bunch of people there. Everybody. I don't remember disliking anybody or feeling out of place with any of the upperclassmen or anything. It was we had good teachers. Of course, I remember Charles Thompson. He was fine. I remember the day he came, first year he came to Howe. It was his first school. And Mama said, now, remember, you have to call him Mr. Thompson. You know, after all, he was almost kin. But we remembered. And he gave us a lot of laughs without realizing it. Because he was like us. He was a country kid, you know. And it showed every once in a while. But he was special. We always, claimed him as belonging to us. And when we all got together,
Well, I thought school was over with when I got to the 8th grade at Luella, but then Prof. Mitchell, everybody knew Prof. Mitchell. He was a superintendent, but he was Prof. to us. And so he came out and got me in a cotton patch and told me I could continue school, so I started to Howe. I'd never been in a town as big as Howe. So we rode the school bus. The school had gotten a new school bus. I think it was about the first government help probably that the school got. I don't know what the deal was, but they got a new school bus and we rode that. And I'll never forget the first day. We got our lessons books and so forth, and they had our lockers in the north end upstairs where high school was. They were more like hen's nests than they were lockers. And so I put my paper and book stuff in a locker. It was up about head high, and went back the next morning. I couldn't find my stuff nowhere. And the lockers they were 4 rows of lockers, more like hen's nest, just about 2 foot square. And I had put mine up in the seniors row. Mine was down on the bottom row. And I found that out pretty quick. But then the school was...
no, they started football in '36. That's why we wrote the song. We didn't have football, we didn't have a pep squad, cheerleaders, anything like that. So in '36 was when we really started having that. And we had a football team. Bill Cloud, of course, was #1 man, and all of them, you know, and Glenn Heston remembers very well. And that meant that we needed a bunch to cheer, you know. So that was when we started having our pep squad. And the colors being black and white, we had black skirts and white shirts. And then they needed a song. So I believe it was Lorene George who put the word out that we would have a contest and let everybody have an opportunity to write one. And for some reason beyond me, they chose our song. But it was, Maxie and I just sat down one day and wrote it and turned it in. A tune of Eyes of Texas, you know. And that was kind of fun, but it was kind of scary because here they are out there singing. And the thing that always amazes me and kind of embarrasses me, I guess I want to say, every time we go to Howe for a function, we have to stand up and be introduced and, you know, and admit that we wrote that song. So, but that was when we started.
Spring of '35, they got some football uniforms. And boy, that was something else. Everybody wanted a football uniform. So I was lucky enough to get one. And so we started a football program. The first organized football program I think I'd ever had. And we had a bunch of boys. I never will forget old Duke Knox. He played tackle. I guess he weighed 135 pounds maybe. And he had never seen a football game. And we went to Tioga and he played 60 minutes in that football game, and he'd never seen one in his life. But we done pretty good that year. And but of course I didn't get to play a lot because Bill Cloud, I played in Bill Cloud's position, so Bill Cloud got to play just about all the time.
Well, there was a preacher at the Methodist Church named Williams, and he decided that he wanted to be the school superintendent. And none of us liked him, which was neither here nor there. But some of our boys did a little research and found out a lot of things about him that we didn't like. And so, but the school board wouldn't listen to us. Mr. Wheat was chairman or president of the board, or whatever. and they wouldn't listen to us, and so we decided that we'd kind of take things in our own hands, you know. So we, the day before, we said, okay, tomorrow we'll come to school just like always, only we won't come to school. We'll bring our lunch, and there was a warehouse out there, and I think it belonged to Sam Ferguson's dad. I'm not positive now, but I think that's whose it was, and that we would meet there. So we did, our entire class, and a few of the juniors didn't come that time. Anyway, the next morning we told Mama where we was going, what we were doing, and why, and I guess she trusted our judgment because she said okay, which was kind of unusual for her to give in to something that was in direct opposition to what the school expected us to do. And so we went to that warehouse that day, and big old thing, empty and all, and we talked about everything and told each other as much as we knew, and so then we went into the second day, and the second day we went to class in the Methodist church. It wasn't class, it wasn't a Bible class or anything. Anyway, Williams preached, and during his sermon, this elderly man came down the aisle just boo-hooing and crying and all this stuff, and went down to him to, you know, whatever. And we had heard about that too. That was his dad, and they did that every church they went to, every time he preached. And those things were bothering us. It's not the right thing, you know. Right. So anyway, when we went into our second day, the school board called us and said, send us a committee over. And so there was me and Maxie and Margaret Erskine and Jack Bradley and Sam Ferguson. There was somebody else, 5 or 6 of us. And it was in his little, his office downtown in kind of a building there he had. And we went to, and the school board was there. And they asked us why, you know, because we hadn't had an opportunity to tell them, you know. And so Jack and Sam were mostly the spokespeople. So they explained to them what it was and everything. And so they said, okay, y'all go back to school tomorrow and we'll make up our minds, we'll consider it. We got to school the next day and they said, Prop's gonna stay. So we got that over with. But it was, we had news people from Sherman and all over around come in and take our picture and, you know, asking us why and all this stuff. Because Prof was a good moral man, and although we didn't always agree with what he said, I mean, you never do when somebody's trying to discipline you, but he was a good person, and we knew that, and he'd been there a while. But when we found out about this other guy, it just didn't make sense that a man like that could replace Prof Mitchell.
Used to have a horse rail right outside where they tied their horses up. And about the time I came along, big enough to remember, well, they were still, some people coming to town in wagons to get their groceries. And the biggest thing that ever happened in Howe, some of the merchants got together, and on Saturday night, they had some guy coming out of Dallas, and he'd set up a movie screen out in the middle of the street. You know, it had 2 sides of businesses, and right out in the middle of the street, he'd set up a movie screen. And they'd show free movies. And Western movies, that type of thing.
Well, I was in the 3rd grade, and we had fire drills back then, and we heard this loud noise, and it was down at the north end of the hall in the science room. And Miss Maxine went to the door, and apparently she saw smoke, or I don't know what she saw, but I remember her grabbing the little boy that was sitting on the row next to the door by the shirt and just dragging him out of his seat and said, everybody get out. My understanding that there was gas had collected under the floor. There was a gas leak. And I was told at the time that Billy Carbin jumped out of the window of the study hall and went around and turned the gas off at the gas meter, or it might have been worse.
In the 40s and 50s, the students and the community's pride in the school expanded to include its organizations. As participation grew in extracurricular activities, so did the students' respect for the school, its teachers, and themselves.
Let me say this, I loved my growing up years. Times were a little bit difficult, but everyone came to town on Saturdays. And when we played football, you couldn't buy a penny pencil in Grayson County. Everybody was at the ball game. My final year was 1942, and I believe the only year that Howe didn't have a coach. Mr. Thompson drove the bus and was our water boy, also the principal or superintendent of the school too. Howe did have good coaches. So what we did, we first elected two captains, one for defense, one was our quarterback for offense. And we went back through the playbooks down through the years and picked out plays that we thought we could execute real well, and it worked. We won district and tied by district. We actually won it, but the referees brought it back a foot. We had it about 2 foot across the line. And something you'll never see today, we were playing Sanger, and the fans came down out of the stands, and it scared the daylights out of me because I thought they were going to beat up on the referees. They were taking up for us. They said, "We made it," which would have won the game. As it wound up, it was a tie game. That's the tie you see on your record board down there. I'm innocent. There's some people here that probably wouldn't agree with that, but Howe used to have a jail, a 1-cell jail. And there was one man that always, he was always causing a little trouble and everything, and so they had him locked in jail one weekend. And so the Cotton Belt Railway, it run through just like it does now, but we had granaries and docks where you put cotton on it after it was ginned and to be shipped out to wherever. And so some people, while he was locked in that jail, they got a chain and wrapped it around the jail and tied it to the back of the train. And they tell me that he was still hollering when it was dragging that jail up the train tracks for about 100 yards, but he never did cause any trouble anymore. Now that's what I hear.
Was there a name for that?
They tell me that the name of them was the Rabbit Group. Anyway, I didn't hook the chain on, I'll put it that way. You wouldn't believe the pride that students had in this school then. There was a couple of boys come down from Sherman, and they wanted to know where a garage was, and told them, and they mentioned this hick town and backwoods school, and boys and girls, the fight started right then. And I think they had a different idea when they left than they did when they got there. This is my home. This is my town, my school. My footprints are deep up there on the football field and in the old school. Some wonderful friends, people. I loved it. I hope that your school years and growing up period here, I hope you have a great time just like I did.
I had a lot of favorite teachers. I don't think I was a favorite student of any of them, but that I had Coach Clayton was one of them, and Miss Francis, and Mr. Thompson taught the math. Well, we did jump out the window a few times and play hooky some, go to Sherman, and throw a little chalk against the blackboard and shoot a few paper wads. But we was pretty good bunch of people. We thought they had what they call. He had this 4-spat club, and he gave you a little. You misbehaved, you did something, and he give you a little slip of paper. Said there'll be a meeting at 3 o'clock, and you go in there, and he gave you 4 licks, and I guarantee you that's all you wanted. Well, I was a freshman when the war broke out on December the 7th, 1941. I was a freshman, and we went in mass up to volunteer. And of course, they told you to go home and shave. That you couldn't. In other words, there was one guy out of the whole bunch went into the service, and that was Shelley Baker. The rest of us all come back home and graduated from high school. We knew what we were going to do when we graduated from high school. We were going right into the service. You didn't have a choice. You knew what you was going to do. Well, we went to the picture show. Yeah, that's where we. Well, and you'd go to Van Alstyne. The Interurban ran then, and it was 15 cents round trip to Van Alstyne, and to Sherman is 35 cents. So most of the time we went to Van Alstyne. Walk around the street, round and around the street. And then if you might find a girl that you walk with, but most of the time you didn't find a girl, so you just went to the picture show, and I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, the picture show, we went with 50 cents, I remember that. 15 cents round trip to Van Alstyne on the Interurban, and I believe it was 17 cents to go to the movie. So that left you 20 cents for a hamburger and a soda pop.
They added a school year, a grade, when I was never in the 6th grade. I went from the 5th to the 7th, and they added from 11 years to 12-year school years back then. And they were building the old middle school in 1936 and 37, the years I started the school. And the students went to school in the churches, and they had different grades in different churches all over town. And I went in the old Methodist church, and it had a 2-story rooms on the back side of it, and there was children upstairs and downstairs. And you had to bring your own lunch. There wasn't any kind of a cafeteria or anything. And we lived on the farm, and I would bring a dozen eggs to town on the school bus and walk to town and sell my eggs and buy stuff to eat for my lunch. Well, I was a cheerleader, and of course the uniforms were quite different. We had knee-length skirts, but we did wear tights underneath them, so when we twirled around, we were decent. And we just marched on the field, and there was really no routine. Just it was very vanilla. It was very plain compared to today's cheerleading squads and everything.
We didn't go to dances. We didn't have dances as one of our school curriculums. We only had I guess at graduation time or junior, senior year. Junior year, the seniors would take
the seniors out for a picnic or some kind of an outing. Then in your senior year, the juniors would take you out to a banquet, and they'd have that'd be the closest thing to a dance, and we did not dance. That was one thing that was a no, very definitely no. My father was a janitor for several years, and he drove a school bus. And he very thoroughly enjoyed being with the students and kidding with them and having fun with them. And they enjoyed him. They looked forward to seeing Mr. Mack in the hallway.
There's more cars and more houses. And of course the schools are bigger. And we only had one school. I started to school at one end of the building, the old building on Highway 5, and went 12 years. I started at one end and we went all the way through the building to 12th grade. We never did skip a grade or anything. We thought at one time we were going to have to consolidate with maybe Van Alstyne. And that was horrible. We didn't want to do that. And then before I graduated, we got Dorchester, didn't we? Yeah, we got Dorchester School District.
Graduation, we had 13 in my class. Back then, we were in the old school, which is the administration building now, and all 12 grades were in the school. We didn't have kindergarten, but we had 12 grades. And I graduated in 1956, of course. We had a junior, senior. We had those every year, and we had them at Grayson Hotel in Sherman, which is gone now, but that was the big hotel in Sherman. And I remember basically a lady by the name of Miss Long, and she later became Miss Clark, that was our sponsor each year of this. So we always had that was kind of the highlight of the year. And you got to realize in 1956, we had one suit, most of us, most of the boys. And we usually got one suit our junior year, which carried us over to the junior and senior year. We didn't get a suit of clothes each year like you guys do. And of course, probably most of you don't like a suit anyway, and I never did either. But anyway, we wore ties and white shirts and a suit, and it was always kind of a pleasure to do this because most of us, in my class especially, the boys didn't have a whole lot. You got to realize the difference in 50 years, much. But graduation was a highlight. Of course, we walked down the gym. You know the old middle school gym. We walked down the center, and we had a wooden platform we walked up, and of course they had the chairs around, and all 13 of us sit around in a semicircle. And of course they talked about us and all that kind of stuff, gave us awards like they do. You have your awards during a certain day, but we had our awards at the graduation ceremony.
Well, there weren't near as many activities as you have now, but we had opportunities for sports. At that particular time in the 50s, Howe did not play football. Only played basketball and baseball. I was involved in those activities and enjoyed sports and enjoyed playing tennis occasionally, and we were involved in Future Farmers of America, and I was involved in the student government. So we had it was a small school, and I guess one of the activities I remember working on a lot was working on the annual, or the staff, to put together the yearbook. Back then there was a TV show, it was called Ozzie and Harriet, and it was Ricky Nelson. Ricky was pretty, later on in life he became a rock star, but a musician, but when I was in high school, Ricky was kind of my idol. He was a good athlete, and he was cool, and he was I guess if I had to pick one out, I never was an Elvis fan, so
I remember Mr. Charles Thompson telling me in the 40s they used to skate on that floor in the gym. And I remember when they first had, whenever you think of Fall Festival, we used to have coronations. Whatever class had the most money would be king and queen. And we'd have plays for, for PTA, and Mr. Howe Pooh and Marshall Robertson used to dress up and be man and wife. And it was funny. When you would get those two together, it was funny. But whenever the school, they didn't have lunchroom there for a long time. And so what would happen would, they would have mothers would bring lunches and would give them to the kids, and they would eat out on the ground. And then when they did get the first lunchroom, it was from the Howe school. And it was moved over there, and that was first lunchroom. The lunchroom workers were Cleta Davis and Bess Calloway.
In 1958, after a 10-year absence, we started the football program again at Howe. We played 8-man football in the league with Gunner, Collinsville, Prosper, Allen, Sadler, South Maid. And a lot of us on the team, the first football game we ever saw, we played in. And we went 5-5. And that was the start of the program, and it's evolved. We played 8-man for about 3 or 4 years, and then it went to 11. Well, every evening, every afternoon after school, we went to the restaurant downtown and had a barbecue sandwich for $1 and French fries for $0.10. And then the biggest activity in a small town like that was on Sunday whenever you attended church, and at night you attended the church youth fellowships. Our dress then was black shoes, white socks, blue jeans with the cuffs rolled up, slung just as low as you could wear them without them falling off, and your shirt with the top button unbuttoned and your collar turned up, greasy ducktails with oil dripping down your neck, sideburns, long hair, combed back. We were all trying to emulate Elvis Presley. He came along about that time. We had the beginning of rock and roll, what we call rock and roll, not what y'all call rock and roll. We had, groups like the Platters, the Imperials, the Beach Boys at the last.
The nation changed during the 60s and 70s. Howe schools and its students remained linked to its small town roots and small school values.
Graduated, I worked at what was then Anderson Clayton that summer, and went to college. I helped them open Grayson County College. That was the first year that Grayson County College was open. And I worked 1 semester, and then got married. My husband was in college too, so we thought he was further along than I was, so I was looking for a job. Well, my principal knew that I was looking for a job, so he said, well, if you're going to quit school, would you come back and work with us in the office doing what you did as an office aide, because they didn't have a secretary, so I guess I might be one of the first school secretaries at Howe. So I went back to work at school doing what I did for them, working in the office, like what y'all would have as office aides. I didn't do any of the financial stuff, but keeping up with the records and stuff, and somehow it stuck, and I've been here for 33 years. We did have a choral club, and that was open to any and all, whether you could sing or not. That's how I got in there. The extracurricular activities was primarily basketball and football. And at that time, basketball was really bigger than football.
Now, the one thing that is not allowed, that was allowed in 1969, is hazing. Oh, no, we wouldn't beat them up or anything, but we'd do stuff like, you know, you'd have the freshmen polish tennis shoes. You know, say, no, I want them polished. And, you know, I mean, why polish tennis shoes? You know, it doesn't do any good, but you'd have them do that. Or you would get them as soon as they got out of basketball or football, like, and say if they lived at Dorchester, you'd take them to Tom Bean and drop them off, and they'd have to walk back. So, you know, I mean, so things like that, you know, things that didn't hurt anything. It just took them, you know, several hours to get back home. And so you do those kind of things. But we didn't hurt anybody. Wasn't anything physical, you know. The Beatles. See, the Beatles became popular in 1964, so that would have been when, I guess, you know, getting close to starting high school. And the Beatles were, then the Rolling Stones, and then, you know, as we get closer to 69, then you certainly had a lot more, you know, Rod Stewart, you had, you know, who goodness, Iron Butterfly, you know, a bunch of those, Led Zeppelin, you know, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, both, you know, they flamed out on us, and so that happened. But those were the music groups. The Beatles were the dominated everything. I was in school when Howe had the first school dance. Y'all ever seen the movie Footloose? Yeah. First one, and it was held at the feed store in at Howe downtown upstairs, and it was every parent. I mean, the committee that went and talked, we went and met with the people at the First Baptist Church, the Methodist Church, and Church of Christ to explain what we would do and would not do at the dance. So it was very much like the movie. And when we went there, the parents outnumbered the kids. They lined that wall all the way around because there wasn't anything going to go on that shouldn't go on. So it was I feel like that whole movie was written about Howe, Texas. I mean, when you look at the teachers I had, because I mean, I can go back through every teacher I had from first grade through high school and think of what they taught me. I would probably give a lot of credit to Norman Dickey. He was my coach and also taught math and other things. But it seems like the teachers when I was growing up instilled that we had to work. We always worked. We always did things that we were supposed to do, even though I think we were a different era because y'all are so much controlled now by state regulations and stuff like that. And I mean, and those are, some of them are very good, and I'm glad they have them. But we didn't have to pass to play sports. We didn't have to pass certain subjects to do other things. But we were taught that we needed those things to achieve things in life. So I think that when I got out of school, started working for the railroad, and then when I got laid off the railroad, started selling cars. What equipped me to sell cars, because that's what I've done very well and excelled at, is selling cars. So I think it's from the teachers that taught me to be self-sufficient, that you have to do it on your own. And they did. And I mean, from every one of them that I had, I can go back not only that, but I'd go back to the parents that I had, my mother, but also, you know, if you want to look at Miss Thornhill, you know, Miss Finney, which is Janie's mother-in-law, all these people, I got whipped by all of them growing up. And what I'm saying is they formed you. When you see politicians like Hillary Clinton, she made a speech several years ago about it takes a village to raise kids, and it certainly does. And I think the smaller towns, because of that, we did have a lot of supervision. And I mean, when I say I got whippings, it was because we did something that deserved it, but everybody got it. You know, I mean, you know, you bend over and all of you got a whipping. So it took a whole village. And so I think the things that Howe did was a good village, and it was did a good job in teaching me what was right and what was wrong. And when we did something wrong, there was more people to correct me than what I think some days there is now. But I still think there's a good bonding of people. As long as you're around people that will correct you and tell you when you do something wrong, I hope there's people around you that tell you when you do something good, because that's important and also encouraging. But I hope there's somebody around to say, hey, don't do that. That's stupid. So, and I'm hoping that's still here, and I think it is.
We were a completely different group of kids, different time, different seasons than our boys and girls are in today. For instance, we could not wear jeans to school at all. We could not wear pants to school at all until my junior year, and it had to be pantsuits. It had to be bought as a top and bottoms that went together. And I remember when that first started happening, how some people were so excited that we were going to get to wear pantsuits. Most of the girls wore pantyhose. Can you imagine? We don't wear those even for funerals anymore, hardly. But we had to wear pantyhose, and even with our tennis shoes, we wore pantyhose more than we did socks when I was in high school. The big highlight of high school was the football team, and getting to be involved in that, whether it be pep squad or majorettes or cheerleaders. No band at that time. We did not have a band. There was only one radio station in Sherman, and you could actually drive up to that station and go in and talk to the KRV. It was well known at that time because you could call in and get dedications made to your boyfriends or your girlfriends, or just silly stuff, and a lot of us were involved in that. And we would go up and have songs played to certain boys that might have been out with a certain girl that night that wasn't us. So some boys had to take girls home early because they were aggravated that someone would dare dedicate a song of such to that. I had a very neat bookkeeping teacher. I'm trying to remember if I can pronounce her name correctly. Yagodensky was English. Kanapi. She was the teacher that I have tried to model myself after. As far as she was loving to the kids when you would allow her to be, but she was very straight-laced. She was there for a reason and a purpose, and you best be, or you weren't in her classroom. You were sent out quickly, but I learned a lot from that lady, and I really appreciated that. She was a fabulous teacher. She really, really was, and she demanded respect, and she would accept nothing less. When I was in school, Howe taught in the school pride. We knew what it was to be proud of our school, of our town, and of ourselves, and how to reach the goals of making right choices so that we could be proud of who we were and where we came from. Our school was known at the time when I was in high school as being one of the best in our district. Rules were respected. We did not rebel against rules. We were taught that authority meant respect. You didn't have to agree with them, but you had to do it because that was the rules. And we had to pay for breaking those rules, just like kids today have to pay. But, well, not really, because we got whippings. We got sent to the office with a board to the behind if it warranted that kind of I hate to use the word punishment, but back then that's what it was. It was punishment for making a bad choice.
Sports-wise, I was pretty much a ragnot. Though I did play some sports, basketball. I really enjoyed track because it was more of an individual type effort and sport. Wasn't big enough to really play football, though I played a couple of years. And then I enjoyed student government, student council, and served as representative and served as officer in the class. Took part in the one-act play, which we won district, I think. That was the first year, I believe, that Howe participated in UIL one-act play and some of those things. I believe we were the first year in '73. Do you remember? You know, I think, of course, I graduated in '73, so there was a little bit of a beginning change. I guess each generation experiences it. But, you know, some of the big rock and roll bands, Led Zeppelin was during that time. One of my favorites was Grand Funk Railroad, and then another was the group Trapeze, which was a little eclectic. A lot of people didn't know of them. I'm trying to think of maybe just some of the amazing hits or something that were during that time. J. Edgar Winter's song Frankenstein, if some remember that. And other than that, The Who was big. And in fact, our song, class song, was one of the Beatles songs, though they broke up in '70. But one of our class song was "Let It Be" from the Beatles. You know, that was I guess one of my least favorite times. The '70s were the Vietnam conflict, and yet '73 was really when the peace process, peace talks began to bear fruit, and with Richard Nixon was the president, Henry Kissinger was negotiating, and it was during the late '70s, '73, that the bombing stopped, and I believe the peace pact was actually signed in '73 that put an end, and perhaps the final troops were withdrawn during that time. So during the '70s, we saw, you know, computers were just coming in, personal computers started appearing, calculators replaced slide rules. Up to that time, classes used slide rules. They didn't use pocket calculators in calculus and those things. And then they began using calculators probably in the '70s and those years.
I remember Ms. Lovelace especially because we had, I think I was in the 4th grade, and we had, the room was split in half. And on one half of the room, the 4th grade went, and the other half, the 5th grade went. So she would teach the 5th grade a subject, and then she would go over to the other half of the class and teach the other class. And that was and Mrs. Poole, of course I love Mrs. Poole. She was a sweetheart. Well, at night we hung out at the Texaco station because there wasn't any place else for us kids to go. So we would sit down there and talk and buy all of Marshall's drinks out of his Coke machine, and on Monday morning I'm sure he'd have to fill it back up, but there wasn't any place to go and have fun around town, so we either hung out on the Texaco parking lot or the bank parking lot, and sometimes the laundromat, and drove up and down the streets. Yeah, I do. I remember the Vietnam War was going on when I was in most of my school life, actually. But I remember the day that they declared that the war was over, and Mr. Linker was the principal in high school, and he came over the PA and told us that they had declared that the Vietnam War was over. And of course we just hooped and hollered and yelled and were so glad, because there was people that were a little older than us that we knew that had gone to the war. And I remember that was just such an exciting day. I don't remember the exact day, but I do remember him coming over the PA and telling us that. And that was a happy day. It was a happy day for everybody, but especially for us kids, because we knew that our boys weren't going to have to go. And I remember the last day that they had the draft, they were drawing numbers, and the last number that they called, and I don't remember how I remember the date, but it was March the 7th, and my brother's birthday was March the 8th. And so he missed that draft by one day. And but I do remember that. That was the biggest thing that was going on then. And of course, while I was in school, I think they went to the moon when I think I was in elementary school, but I remembered all of us sitting around the TV watching them go to the moon, and that was a big thing. I'm sure there was a lot of other things, but those are the two things that stand out in my mind. Oh, I see some of the kids that have stayed around Howe, but a lot of them have moved off, and of course we've had a couple that have passed away, and that was pretty devastating to a class of, I think we had 34 that graduated. And but I see a few of them around town. We all thought we wanted to move off when we graduated, and some of us did and came back.
In the 70s, students excelled in several new activities and some old favorites. The Howe Highlighters took the field in 1974 and introduced parents and students to the competitive world of drill teams. Students could also participate in band, learning to play an instrument, work as a team, and read music. Began performing during Friday night football games in 1975. As popularity grew, so did its number of students. Soon students began competing in UIL solo and ensemble contests. Soon the marching band began winning state UIL marching band competitions. Students in greater numbers began joining after-school organizations. The Future Homemakers of America grew to 100 members, with many of its members participating as state officers. The Future Farmers of America also saw growth in participation. Students began traveling to shows in San Antonio and Houston. There, students won sizable scholarships they could apply toward college expenses.
Mainly sports. I probably should have been more involved in UIL stuff like that. It would have been rounded me more, I guess, but football, basketball, track, that's pretty much it for me. Norman Dickey was the head football coach then. We had Eddie Brister, Ricky Clements, yeah. And Tommy Skipworth was our coach whenever we were freshmen. He also assisted the high school until that year, and then he strictly went junior high. I think our class held the record for the most outhouses stolen and put on the bonfire. And and I know that a lot of people won't remember, the younger kids won't know even what I'm talking about, but the story of the Underwoods man ending up in one of our outhouses, the Underwoods restaurant that was in Sherman, and the old billboard that was on Highway 75, and the little man that stood on the billboard with his bell ringing the dinner bell, and ended up in one of the outhouses on the bonfire and the front page of the Sherman paper. So I think if there was anything that our class was known for, it was for the outhouses and how many were stolen and borrowed maybe, but they never got back. So, but that was a lot of fun, and that's something that I think the kids miss out on nowadays, are those kinds of things. Exactly who came up with the idea? It may have been some of the moms, but I think it was really a good thing because it really symbolized a close-knit group of kids in a small town, unlike a large town that were really close and knew each other, ran around, did things, and really symbolized that, you know, we were growing apart, that we were going to go our separate ways. And even though there's a lot of us that are still here and a lot that's come back, and we've gotten a little closer now, which is kind of neat to relive some of those things.
I have a favorite teacher, and how the whole school was, it took the whole group of teachers to make it click. It was the most wonderful bunch. I couldn't have asked for any better education than I got here.
Is there a teacher?
Yes, just about everything that I learned here at the high school. I prepared, I feel like, for a journalism career right here at Howe High School, with the great grammar training in the English classes, in which I was very interested. And also I was in the first photography class that was offered here, and that was great. And I was on yearbook staff all 4 years of high school, and that helped me a lot with photography and editing and writing the cut lines that went under the pictures and that sort of thing. I guess one of the funniest things looking back on it was we used to have a teacher named Pat Stewart. She's now on the school board here. And everyone loved to pull practical jokes on Mrs. Stewart. And we had a coach named Eddie Brister at that time. And it was March 2nd, it was Texas Independence Day. And he brought a shot put to the school and told Mrs. Stewart that that was a cannonball from one of the cannons at the Alamo. So that was pretty funny. I haven't ever forgotten that. So, and she fell for it for a few hours. So.
In the next 3 decades, Howe students were more influenced by technology, culture, and the world around them. Most students in high school had their own cars. Computers were introduced to the classrooms. Students began to listen to their own music and carry cell phones. The culture surrounding our town had an impact But the teachers, family values, and the closer friendships students develop in the schools still remained close to the heart.
To have a car, I would say probably most of the students had a car that could drive, but they weren't new. I had a Camaro, a tan Camaro, but it was old. There was one girl in our class that was fortunate to have a brand new car. Mom and Dad bought her brand new. I believe it was a 442. You guys know Mr. Bennett? Have you ever watched the Bowling for Dollars or whatever? Before your time? He used to do a little TV show on Channel 12 locally, and it was Bowling for Dollars, and he was our math teacher here. And he was really animated and just a great teacher, and I didn't like math at all. And he just made me appreciate math and just very patient and made math fun. And he was the best impromptu speaker I have ever met in my life. We had, for our sports banquet one year, the speaker couldn't show up, and at the very last minute they asked Mr. Bennett would he do it, and he got up there and he had everybody in stitches. It was hilarious. It was the best event that I remember in our high school career.
Sure, there were several really. I had Norman Bennett was an algebra teacher. He was a real interesting guy. He was in a lot of films. He's I guess in acting and that kind of thing. And had a teacher named Mrs. Jarma, was my English teacher. She was a real kind of outstanding lady. She kind of gave us life lessons all the time. I think she's been retired, left Howe a few years ago, not too long ago. Those are two. It's interesting. We had a small class, about 45 people, and as we went through school, most of the class started in the first grade together and all the way through the 12th grade. So by the time we were seniors, we were like family. So honestly, a lot of the guys, we didn't date each other in our class. I mean, there were a few, but for the most part, it was like dating your sister. I mean, it was really funny. We fought like brothers and sisters, and that kind of thing. But I dated some girls from Sherman mostly. I didn't have anything really serious going on. I was too busy playing. Van Alstyne was the biggest rival for Howe back when I was in school. Of course, they were 2A. I think they're 3A now. They were 2A. They would come over and paint, VA and blue on our school. One time they did on the side of the wall. So they were our biggest when they would come over. We'd have a big bonfire every year, and we would end up having to put guards around the bonfire because if we didn't, those guys would show up the night before the bonfire and light it, catch it on fire. Try to ruin our bonfires.
In 1983, it was the largest class that had graduated from Howe High School, and I think there were 63. They worried about how they were going to fit everybody into the First Baptist Church, and I don't think they hold graduation there anymore. It was a tight fit. And
I think the core values of Howe hasn't really changed a whole lot. That's the reason why I moved back. After college, I worked for three years, I guess, in Oklahoma. And when I got married and we started having kids, the desire was to move back to Howe. So lived here my entire life and look forward to moving back and raising my family here and kind of repeating the cycle. I remember several of us, and I think we were in Family Living and Parenthood class or something with Joetta Penn, and she made the comment that, so many of you act like you'll, keep in touch and you'll be best friends forever. And there were some of us who just said, well, how would we never keep in touch? We would always keep in touch. There were probably 15 or 20 in my class that I went from kindergarten through 12th grade together with. Still see some of them from time to time, but we just don't keep in touch like you'd like to. You start having your own lives, your own things that are dictating your schedule, and then you start having kids, and it's hard. But there's something unique about Howe that when you do have a chance finally to see each other, to get together, it's just like you're right back to where you were, the day you graduated. I'm old enough to have gone through one class reunion. It was the 10-year reunion, and it was just such a neat time because maybe 30 or so of our 55 in our graduating class got together, and we just sat around and told stories. And some of the pressures and some of the, appeal and feel like the need to be cool, a lot of that was gone, and it was more people on a genuine level, and it was just a great thing. So a long answer to no, not really, but I would like to. one thing that I thought was good about the graduation ceremony was that he stressed the importance of I guess, keeping it more as a solemn, not a solemn ceremony as in sad, but kept it respectable. No hoots and hollers and air horns or anything like that. It was just a nice event that you could look back on with pride and just say, wow, that was a neat time. It's being in y'all's position, it's the best time of your life, and you ought to realize it and grab hold of it.
Sports are a lot more competitive now than they used to be. You see you guys in the paper all the time. We made it to the regionals a couple of times, but the overall athletic, the school they compete in every sport, in which, because I'm a coach, I noticed that, I believe we went to the regional playoffs in football. Basketball, I think we just made it out of district, which was probably in 1987 or 88, something like that. And who is my favorite teacher? I remember all of them. Different ones for different things. I remember Miss Jarma, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Macon, Miss Finney. Mr. Gilstrap was our principal back then. And every single one of them, I remember something that I loved about them. Miss Cordell, they say that you don't remember things that were bad, but you remember things that are good, and I loved every one of them. I sure did. The very first thing that comes to my mind is the Challenger blowing up. I remember sitting, it was in the morning, maybe third or fourth period in Miss Finney's homemaking class, and she turned on the TV, and everybody's like, what's going on? And it showed it was just amazing to see something that was so quiet and so, you didn't know what to think, but I do remember that like it was yesterday.
Miss Cordell was an English teacher, and she just made it so interesting and so fun. She was just out there. If you ever run into Miss Cordell, ask her to tell you what her favorite thing is to eat and how to describe it to you. She loved juicy, greasy hamburgers. And she said the best hamburger she ever had was the one that the grease just ran down her arm. It was the best.
Norman Bennett, by far. Norman Bennett was one of those guys. He's the nicest guy in the world. If you ever were to have one of his classes, he would shake everybody's hand. He would smile at everybody, and he'd also kind of cut up a little bit. Great story about Norman Bennett. Geometry, I think it was my junior year. He would write on the board. Okay, he would do sine angle side angle side. He'd write SAS, and he'd do side side side. He'd write SSS, and he'd say all this, and he said, but one thing you can't do is angle side side. And he'd write ASS on the board and mark it out, and just laugh. I was a senior, and I was supposed to be a leader in the school, and I'd like to think that I was, but at this particular moment I was not. There was a fight at the very west end of the hall at the old high school. It was a girl fight, and these two girls were just going at it. And a lot of people were standing around in a circle and just kind of, egging them on, just, go, 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 and this kind of thing, and I was one of them. Norman Bennett came down there and broke up the fight, and he looked at me and said, I thought some of you guys were supposed to be the leaders of this school. And he stared at me, and I felt like a germ. And for the next 3 weeks, he would greet everybody, shake their hand, and smile at everybody coming in the door, wouldn't look at me for about 3 weeks. I was crushed. When the nicest guy on the planet won't acknowledge you, it makes you feel a little bad. I think that's where we really were the most talented. Made varsity my freshman year, played a little bit of center field, and we made the playoffs. And again, the next year we were ranked, I think, 10th in state my sophomore year. Went pretty far in the playoffs, regionals, I think. We never made it past regionals. That was the cutoff. Junior year we made regionals again. We had two dominating pitchers, Chris Garner and Trey Dedman. Then our senior year we were ranked first in state. We were 27-2 going into the playoffs, and that was pretty nice. Somebody came in through the gym and told us that the Gulf War was on. They didn't say the Gulf War is on, but obviously they said we're in war now, and they made that very clear to us, and we took a little break from our practice and, you know, said a little prayer for him. Miss Stewart, I don't know how she got the name Miss Stew. I don't know where that came from. It was long before us, but we, you know, it became Mrs. Stew, Stew Bunny Honey, Stew Bunny Honey with all the lunch money. And Mrs. Stew, it was back in the time during Bo Jackson was real big, and the commercials were out, Bo knows football, Bo knows baseball. But we'd get into Miss Stew's class real early and right on the board, Miss Stew knows, you know, jogging, Miss Stew knows karate, and, you know, it was all kinds of stuff like that. And she would just get the biggest kick out of it, though. She was great. And Miss Stew had this one program, and I don't know how we got away with this either, but there was this program called SAM on the computers. And what you would do is type in a word and it would say it on the computer. That's dangerous for high school kids. A lot of people went out in the hall for that little program.
I liked U2. You had Ace of Base, yeah. You had Stone Temple Pilots, you had Pearl Jam, you had Nirvana.